Ultra-processed food is actually not food. So, if it's not food, what is it? Well, it's a toxin.
Welcome back to Emery Pharma's podcast series. Today we are welcomed by our honorable guest, Dr. Robert Lustig. My name is Neeku Mahdavian. I'm the Director of Operations and Corporate Development at Emery Pharma. We are a contract research organization with a mission to help pharma companies develop safe drugs and to treat various diseases. We're pleased to have Dr. Lustig back with us today to answer more questions. He had previous talks that covered a wide range of topics, including the impact of ultra-processed foods, sugar, fructose, metabolism, fatty liver disease, and different syndromes related to mental health, and the role of personal responsibility and public health policies. So we are honored to have him here today. So Dr. Lustig, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, Neetu.
Today, we wanted to learn a little bit more regarding, a very prominent soda company. We're not going to mention any names, but they say that soda contains 140 calories, which is 7% of the daily reference intake of calories that an adult should consume to maintain a healthy diet. Do you agree that simply looking at calorie number is a little misleading? And can you explain why calories from sugary drinks like soda are more metabolically harmful than calories from other sources?
So, of course, Neetu, this is my whole, raison d'etre, if you will. My job, unwritten job, if you will, is to kill the calorie. Hashtag kill the calorie. So what is a calorie? Where did it come from? Why do we even care about it? So a calorie is a unit of physics. It's a measurement. It is the amount of energy that it takes to raise 1 gram of water 1 degree centigrade. So it's basically a measure of heat, is what it is. Okay? And in that respect, if you are purely interested in the physics of it, it doesn't matter where the calorie comes from because the calorie is the heat. That's what the calorie is the heat. And so heat is heat. So therefore you would say, well, calories are calories. And that's, of course, what the industry says. Well, in order to measure a calorie from food, you have to take that food and explode it in a contraption called a bomb calorimeter. Okay, it basically blows up the food and determines the difference between the amount of heat to get it to blow up and the amount of heat released. And that's how you measure how many calories a given food has. And it is true that a calorie burned in this bomb calorimeter is a calorie burned. That's true. But what is not true is that a calorie eaten is a calorie eaten. Then it depends on where those foodstuffs came from. And the reason is because we don't run on heat. We run on chemical energy called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And how much ATP you generate is really the indicator of how many molecules of energy you actually get out of food. That's not heat. So from the standpoint of what it is you're measuring, calories are actually irrelevant. Okay? So turns out different foods will generate different amounts of ATP based on different properties of those foods. And I have, explained this in, podcasts before. So this isn't new. I mean, the best way to explain it is to look at different kinds of calories. Almonds are my favorite. You eat 160 almonds. How many of those calories did you burn? You ate 160 calories. Turns out you actually only absorbed 130 calories. So you can only burn 130. So what happened to the other 30 that you didn't absorb? Turns out the fiber in the almonds, both soluble and insoluble, prevented their absorption, carried it further down the intestine so that the microbiome chewed up those calories and generated their own ATP and generated their own heat, which is not part of you. It's the microbiome's energy and the microbiome's heat. So even though you ate it, you didn't get it. But you measured the calorie at your lips. What you really care about is measuring them at the intestinal brush border, because that's what gets absorbed. So a calorie is not a calorie, because if you ate it with fiber, the calorie wasn't for you. It was for your bacteria. So that's an easy way to, explain this dichotomy. Second, protein. So protein, when it gets converted to energy, has to be cleaved into its component amino acids, right? Amino acids are the constitutive building blocks of proteins. And so we have enzymes in our intestine that break up proteins into individual amino acids. And then we absorb those amino acids. And then if we're going to use them for energy, they go to the liver. They don't go to the muscle, they go to the liver. And the liver has to take the amino group off in order to turn it into energy. So they turn that amino acid into an organic acid. And then the organic acid can then participate in mitochondrial function to generate ATP. It takes energy to pull that amino group off. So you actually have to invest energy to get energy out. So there's a net loss of energy when you're burning an amino acid as compared to, say, a carbohydrate. So you actually lose energy instead of gaining it, because you will generate fewer ATP for the same number of, quote, calories. So a calorie is not a calorie because it depends on what it was you were burning. Number 3, fats. So over here we have omega-3 fatty acids. Heart healthy, save your life, anti-Alzheimer's, single best thing you can put in your body. And over here we have trans fats, the devil incarnate, okay? Consumable poison. Will kill you in 10 years if you keep eating them. And we have the data to prove that. They're both 9 calories per gram. One will save your life, one will kill you. Because a calorie is not a calorie. It's not about the calories, it's about the biochemistry of the molecules themselves. And finally, the one I spend most of my time talking about, fructose and glucose. So glucose and fructose are both C6H12O6. Fructose and glucose are both 4 calories per gram. Glucose and fructose can both be metabolized to energy, but not the same way. Glucose usually goes to glycogen. Fructose usually goes to fat because they are very different. And it turns out that fructose is a mitochondrial toxin. It actually inhibits 3 enzymes that mitochondria need in order to be able to burn and create all those ATPs. Glucose, on the other hand, actually accentuates mitochondrial function. So at the level of the mitochondria, glucose is a stimulant and fructose is a toxin, even though they're both 4 calories per gram. So a calorie is not a calorie. It depends on the biochemistry of each individual foodstuff. So we don't care about the heat. We care about the ATP. And different foodstuffs are metabolized differently to generate those ATP molecules. This is why calories are irrelevant, and this is why we must kill the calorie.
Just leading off from that, you mentioned how fructose is a metabolic toxin or poison. Can you kind of break down what it means and how it impacts the liver, insulin, and different processes in the body, and how it handles it differently with fructose compared to glucose, for example?
So glucose stimulates 2 enzymes that are necessary for mitochondrial function. It stimulates AMP kinase. Now, AMP kinase is like the fuel gauge on the liver cell. When you burn a lot of energy, you turn ATP into ADP, adenosine diphosphate, and then into AMP, adenosine monophosphate, because the energy is actually in the phosphate bonds. That's how ATP works. The energy is located in the bonds between the individual phosphates. So every time you need some energy, you cleave a phosphate, and that will liberate the energy that you need to power the cell. Point is, when your cells get low, you've turned a lot of ATP into AMP. And AMP then boosts or gooses this enzyme called AMP kinase, which is one of the signals to create new, fresher mitochondria and more mitochondria to engage in increased energy generation, because the cell's saying to itself, hey, I'm running low on fuel. I got to create some more. So let me make some more mitochondria so I can get some more fuel. So it's a servo mechanism inside the cell to keep cellular energy up. Okay? So AMP kinase, good. In addition, glucose also stimulates a second enzyme called HADH, hydroxyacyl-CoA dehydrogenase. This is one of the enzymes that's necessary to take two carbon fragments from fats and get them ready for oxidation so that they can be burned to also create ATP. So everything that glucose does to mitochondria is to stimulate more energy production. So glucose, for lack of a better word, we can call good. Fructose, this sweet molecule, the molecule we seek, the molecule that we love, because the molecule that's addictive, because it's the one that makes the reward center in the brain light up like a Christmas tree. Okay? That molecule, even though it's still 4 calories per gram, even though it's still C6H12O6, because of its unique stereochemistry, it has a unique stereochemistry different from glucose. It is metabolized completely differently. It is brought into the liver by a different transporter. It's the GLUT5 transporter, not the GLUT2 transporter. And it doesn't go to glycogen. It goes straight to the mitochondria. And the mitochondria become overwhelmed by the fructose load, and it throws the excess off, and then that excess turns to fat through this process in the liver cell called de novo lipogenesis, DNL, new fat making. Now, glucose, almost none of it ends up in DNL. Fructose, a sizable proportion, depending on what the load is, will end up in DNL. And so you are making fat, and you're diverting all of that energy away from mitochondria and toward the generation of fat. And therefore, the mitochondria are not making ATP out of it. And the fat is clogging up the liver cell. So you basically are doing detrimental double duty out of this molecule, which looks very much like the other one, but it's completely different. And people don't understand this because they've been told a calorie is a calorie, a sugar is a sugar. No, they're not. They are not. And anyone who says that is a fool or a liar, including the soda company you mentioned, who will remain nameless, because that's their jam. That's what they say. It is not true. It is patently not true. But if they admitted it was not true, then nobody would buy their product. That's the problem. That's marketing. Yeah. Well, it's more propaganda than marketing. What's the difference between marketing and propaganda? Marketing is using information to espouse your point of view. Propaganda is using disinformation to espouse your point of view. The difference is the truth. So when you use the truth to sell your product, you're marketing. When you use a lie to sell your product, that's propaganda. That's the difference. Okay, so that's what we've got. The point is, fructose inhibits three enzymes involved in ATP generation. It inhibits AMP kinase, that one, the fuel gauge. It inhibits ACAD-L, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase long chain, which is necessary to cleave the two carbon fragments, and it inhibits CPT1, carnitine palmitoyl transferase 1, which is necessary to regenerate the cofactor carnitine, which is necessary as a transporter for fatty acids to get into the mitochondria in the first place. The sum total of which means that fructose inhibits mitochondrial function. Fructose inhibits ATP generation. Fructose inhibits energy metabolism. Fructose creates fat. Fructose generates adiposity. Fructose is bad. So they are not the same.
Yeah. So, with that, then why is it so prevalent in nature, fruits and different things?
That's a very good question. So fructose is a holdover from our plant ancestors. Fructose is how our plants decided to store energy. Okay, we are animals, and there is no animal that stores energy as fructose. Not one. Okay, all the way down to the amoeba, there is no need for fructose for any energy need in an animal cell, anywhere. This is one of the things that diverged plants from animals. And one of the reasons they're plants. That doesn't mean they're not intelligent. It just means they're very different. The point is that it is very prevalent because, number one, it is an energy source for plants. They can use it for energy. We basically can't. But there's another reason, and that is because it's sweet. And because it's sweet, humans and other animals would eat the fruit and therefore then in their feces spread the seeds. So it was a good evolutionary trick to play on animals in order to propagate their species. So that's why we think it was prevalent. So the question is, should we be eating fruit if that's all true? And the answer is yes, we should be eating fruit, but whole fruit. And the reason is because the fruit comes with something else, also not for us. It comes with the fiber. The fiber is not for us. The fiber is for our bacteria, for our microbiome. The fiber is food for our bacteria. We have to feed our gut. And right now, ultra-processed food is fiberless food. And that means that it's starving our gut. And when you starve your gut gets mad. And it basically turns on you. And I've often said, if you don't feed your gut will feed on you. It will actually strip the mucin layer, which is a protective mechanical layer, off your intestinal epithelial cells, rendering your gut susceptible to all the junk in your intestine, which can actually lead to inflammation, gut and systemic inflammation. So the fiber is the protective aspect. And so the fiber is the important part of the fruit. The problem is we get rid of the fiber, we squeeze it and freeze it. And then it lasts forever. It's a commodity. But in fact, we've removed the fiber.
We also had a question from one of the viewers actually related to artificial sweeteners like, sucrose and honey. FDA has actually acknowledged that certain forms of high fructose corn syrup, the HFCFs that you always talk about, is recognized as safe. But why have they stated that certain foods containing this cannot be marked as natural, for example? So then they add, the sweeteners. So how would you explain that?
So fructose containing sweeteners, and there are 5 of them. Sucrose, table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, what's in soda, and, other foodstuffs that are ultra processed because there's no high fructose corn syrup in nature. Agave, maple syrup, and honey. Those are all fructose containing sweeteners. And for lack of a better measure, they're all equivalent. Okay, because they're all about 50 to 75% fructose. So it doesn't really matter if you're using sucrose or high fructose corn syrup. It doesn't matter if you're using maple syrup, honey, or agave. Okay, a gram is a gram, and half of it's fructose, and the fructose is a problem. Now, does it make a difference which one the industry uses? Some people think that high fructose corn syrup is the worst, and the reason is because for the other four, the glucose and the fructose are bound together. For high fructose corn syrup, they're separated, they're free. So you can absorb them immediately and rapidly. And that might be true. But the studies that were done back in the late 2000s pitting sucrose against high fructose corn syrup showed essentially no metabolic difference between the two. They're both equally bad. And so I'm not in a position to be able to say, oh, high fructose corn syrup is worse because it's metabolically worse. Yes, high fructose corn syrup is worse, but it's not because it's metabolically worse. It's because it's economically worse, because it's cheaper, because it's made from corn. And that is very, prevalent in the United States, whereas sugarcane is a whole lot less prevalent. And, there's a lot more money involved in purifying sugarcane than in generating high fructose corn syrup. And so the price of high fructose corn syrup is half that of sucrose. That means that the food industry can afford to put more into food. And that's what makes it worse, not because of the molecule itself.
And then can you kind of explain how this is problematic in terms of their impact and on obesity rates, also related to, younger children in taking these things?
So the question is, what does fructose do to your body? Okay. It's a mitochondrial toxin. It inhibits mitochondrial ATP generation. So you have all of these, quote, calories, and no place for them to go. And so they generate fat. Okay, so your cells are starved, but you're generating fat instead. And that fat has to go somewhere. So when the fat is in the liver has to get rid of the fat. So it packages it into a molecule which we call triglyceride. And then that triglyceride goes into the bloodstream. And then insulin circulating in the bloodstream will offload that fat that's in the triglyceride molecule into adipose tissue, into fat cells. And that will grow your fat cells. So the combination of fructose-induced triglyceride plus insulin equals adiposity. So that's one of the drivers of obesity. It's not the only driver, but it's a big one, and it's one that kids are exposed to, and it's one that even fetuses are exposed to, and it's our best assessment as to why we now have an epidemic of neonatal obesity. How about that? They don't diet or exercise, but because of what the mother consumed, that's actually generating increased adiposity in utero before the baby's even born because of the fructose in the mother's diet. So that's putting that baby at risk for a lifelong set of health problems. That's not okay. And as a pediatrician, it's my job to protect children. Well, sometimes I have to protect them before they're even born. So that's, one problem right there. What else does fructose do? So it generates fat, yes. It also binds to proteins. Now, glucose binds to proteins too. This is a process called the Maillard reaction, or the browning reaction, or the caramelization reaction. Okay? Why do bananas brown? Why do we paint barbecue sauce on our ribs before we, put them on the grill? We get that nice brown caramel color and flavor. Well, that is glucose or fructose binding to amino acids and proteins irreversibly. What that does is it changes the structure and the flexibility of those proteins. It denatures them, and it causes them to be less functional and puts the cell then at risk. Okay? It also will peroxidate lipids, and the lipids become less functional. in membranes, for instance. And all of these things then put each cell at risk for cell death. So the Browning reaction is actually the aging reaction. It's what causes cells to age. And the faster it occurs, the quicker the cells age and the quicker the cells die. Now, glucose can do it. But fructose, because of its unique stereochemistry, does it 7 times faster. And releasing 100 times the number of oxygen radicals called oxidative stress, which go along with the Maillard reaction. So you get double duty, detrimental double duty out of this Maillard reaction. You get the Browning reaction, and you also get the oxidative stress, where the reactive oxygen species can damage cells and proteins. Okay, so that's number 2. And then finally, number 3 reason is because glucose is not addictive and fructose is. Because glucose does not stimulate the reward center of the brain, but fructose does. And in the extreme, we have sugar addicts. And about 20% of America is sugar addicted. So those are the 3 reasons why fructose is different from glucose and why fructose is detrimental to our collective and our individual health.
I think that brings us to the next topic. In terms of if there's more fructose in, different foods, how come people are living longer?
Well, are they? That's a good question. Compared to 1900, yes, people are living longer. Okay. In 1900, the mean age of death in the United States was 47. Okay. By 1980, the mean age of death was about 78. We went from 47 to 78. And then we even sort of tilted up a little bit more. But over the last 5 years, we have seen a life expectancy decline here in the United States. Other countries have continued their upward swing in terms of longevity, in terms of life expectancy. So for instance, Japan, their mean age of death right now is 86. Our mean age is 77 and a half. So we are actually paying an 8.5-year longevity tax to Japan. And the question is why? And a lot of that has occurred in the last 5 years. So in fact, life expectancy has actually gone down. So why did we go from 47 to 76 in the first half of the 20th century? And now we're starting to see it go down. And the answer is because the first half of the 20th century, 3 things happened that were all good from a disease standpoint: vaccination, sanitation, and antibiotics. That increased lifespan by 30 years, those 3 things. And 2 of those are public health. One, of course, is not the antibiotics. Okay? So that definitely increased lifespan quite a bit. But now we're seeing all of these chronic diseases chipping away at that lifespan. And so, in fact, we are not seeing people living longer. We are seeing people living much shorter. And not only that, but their lifespan's going down, but their health span, the amount of years that they have disease-free, are going down even faster. So, in fact, the average health span of America right now is about 60 compared to their mean age of death, which is about 77 and a half. So the average health span to lifespan difference is 17 years of misery that we are now experiencing because we are collectively unhealthy because of these chronic diseases, which ultra-processed food and very specifically sugar are driving. So I would take issue with your question.
Yeah, so along that, if someone is, aging at around that age, what can they do to live a healthier life?
So if they've made it to 60, that's good. The question is, what can be done to try to extend that health span? And the answer is reduce the toxins. Reduce the toxins. And where are the toxins? Well, they're everywhere. They're in the air and they're in the water, but mostly they're in the food. Okay? Ultra-processed food is just filled with toxins of various sorts. Okay? In fact, ultra-processed food is not food. What's the definition of food? Substrate that contributes to either growth or burning of an organism. Well, I've already shown you how fructose inhibits burning. Well, it turns out fructose actually inhibits growth also. My colleague at Hebrew University, Jerusalem, has actually looked at bone growth. And it turns out fructose inhibits bone growth. It inhibits skeletal growth, cancellous bone growth, trabecular bone growth, cortical bone growth. And we know from the cancer literature it actually hijacks growth to increase cancer cell formation, but doesn't occur in normal cells. So bottom line, if you don't contribute to burning and you don't contribute to growth, are you a food? Ultra-processed food is actually not food. So if it's not food, what is it? Well, it's a toxin. So avoid the toxins. Avoid ultra-processed food. Now, what in ultra-processed food are the bad guys? Fructose, omega-6 fatty acids, seed oils, so, canola, soy, soybean, etc. Okay. Why are they in ultra-processed food? Because they're cheap, but that doesn't make them good. Okay. On the other hand, omega-3s are terrific, but they're not in ultra-processed food, right? Because they smell like fish, which is, kind of the antithesis of ultra-processed food. Right? In addition, the emulsifiers turn out to be extraordinarily problematic. So emulsifiers are what hold fat and water together. That's what detergents are. That's what you put in your clothes washer. Tide is an emulsifier. Okay? It's a molecule that has a polar head on one end and a non-polar head on the other, very specifically to be able to bind both fat and water together so you can lift the stain out. So what happens if you swallow a detergent? You chew through the mucin layer. It actually dissolves the mucin layer off those intestinal epithelial cells, allowing for this systemic and gut inflammation, actually driving the inflammatory process. So we want to promote metabolism by making mitochondria work better, and we want to suppress inflammation. And most of the inflammation is at the level of the gut. In both cases, the food is the problem. So what I would say is eat real food. Eat food that came out of the ground or animals that ate the food that came out of the ground. And if you do that, you'll be fine. That is my single best recipe for longevity.
And you always say if you can cook it in your kitchen, right? It's not processed.
If you can cook it in your kitchen, it's not processed. But if it has ingredients you've never heard of, it's not.
Yeah. So what about someone, if they have a cheat day, for example, they eat all this bad food, junk food, away from their regular healthy diet. Can they exercise their way out of that, cheat day diet?
If they only do it one day, it's not a big problem. Everyone's allowed a celebration. Everyone's allowed a, falling off the wagon, as long as you get back on. But if it's every day, then it's a problem. So the question is, can you exercise your way out of a bad diet? And the answer is no, you can't. Here's why. There are 8, count them, 8 subcellular pathologies that drive metabolic disease and aging. And here are the 8. Glycation, we talked about. Oxidative stress, we talked about. Mitochondrial dysfunction, we talked about. Insulin resistance, we sort of touched on. Membrane instability has to do with omega-3s. Inflammation, we touched on. Methylation, that we didn't talk about. And finally, something called autophagy, self-eating, okay, where basically the cell recycles junk that has been created. Okay? Those 8 processes are all made worse by ultra-processed food, all 8 of them. Exercise will fix 4 of the 8. It will fix mitochondrial dysfunction, which is good. It will fix insulin resistance, which is good. It will fix inflammation, which is good. And it will fix autophagy, which is also good. So exercise is the second best thing you can do for yourself, but it won't fix the other 4. In fact, it actually makes oxidative stress worse. So even though exercise is good, and I'm for it, you actually cannot outrun a bad diet.
So stick to a healthy diet.
Healthy diet first, exercise second, sleep third, and you've got the entire trifecta.
Great. Well, I think that wraps up today's questions. Thank you so much, Dr. Lustig, for the plethora of information that you shared to us. To our dedicated viewers, thank you so much for listening. If you have any other questions, please drop a comment and we'll be happy to include it during our next podcast with Dr. Lustig. And if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe today. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you again for all the information. And
My pleasure.
we look forward to meeting you again soon. Thank you.